Hello, my friends. Welcome to the latest edition of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. And hey, feel free to like and share these episodes. And today's going to be a good one because I had a chance. A buddy of mine said, "You need to talk to Eric Hayden." I said, "Okay, who's Eric Hayden?" He goes, "He's one of the biggest movers and shakers that you may not have ever heard of." And I'm like, "Really?" Urban Catalyst, fluid pumping, all the other stuff. We're going to get into all the downtown San Jose stuff and everything else like that. But man, here's what I need to know from you, Eric. How many things are going on in your brain at one time? I mean, when you get up in the morning, how many things go through your head? Because you're one of those guys.
Well, if you ask my wife, I forget about half the things that I'm supposed to be remembering. But yeah, it's challenging because I got a lot of stuff. I got Urban Catalyst, which is really 5 different companies. And then I have Fluid Dynamics Plumbing, which is, a totally separate industry. I got a lot of employees, a lot of things to kind of consider. I do a real good job of keeping lists so I can remember all the things I need to do.
Were you always that guy? Can you tell me the 9-year-old Eric was the guy you are today in there where you were already figuring out a way to do things?
100%. I've been this person my whole life. I started out as a kid. I'd find a bunch of sand dollars down at the beach in Oregon, and then I'd sell them. And I ended up making about $10 an hour when I was like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And really from there, it was, could I get good grades? Figured out how to do it. Got really good grades. Got into college. Decided I was going to be an electrical engineer with a math minor because I really liked math. I mean, who says that? I ended up being a tutor in the math study center for calculus in college and really had a blast doing that. Although, kind of an odd job to have for most folks, especially since I was.
Oh, dude, we're going to get down to all your odd jobs. We're going to go through all those odd jobs because I know when you sit back and hear me say, I'm talking to this guy, the CEO guy. No, this is one of the most interesting people in the world. He really could have been that guy on that commercial. But you had, okay, with math, and you and I were talking about it. You obviously speak the language of math. I knew someone, my ex-wife was a molecular cell biogeneticist, and I put her through school and I helped her with math, and I would do flashcards for her where I would say, okay, this, and she would go on a 10-minute rant. And I'm like, how? And she goes, well, if you say this, then this applies. And if you say that, then that applies. And then this means this theorem comes into effect, which will take you to that law. And I'm like, it's a language. She goes, yeah, it's a language.
Absolutely. I credit my success in math to having very neat handwriting.
Oh, gosh, that's something you don't ever think about, right?
Hey, my handwriting is so neat that one of my kind of claims to fame in college, I was in physics with calculus 3. And I got a 4.0 in the class. And a couple years later, one of my lab partners had a girlfriend who was in that class. She was a little younger than us. And he goes, hey, bro, my girlfriend's in physics with calculus 3 and she's studying for the final. And they handed out the study guide. Check it out. And the study guide was my final. Because I got perfect grade and had perfect handwriting, the professor's like, why rewrite this? Let's hand this guy's out.
Wow. You're old enough now to understand that you were blessed with an intelligence that most of us have to acquire.
Well, I can say being an electrical engineer where you test your intelligence every single day against all your peers, I found out I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not one of the smartest guys. I kind of think of it like a bike race. Some guys are out there in the peloton, fighting for the yellow jersey. I'm kind of at the front of the main pack, and that's not so bad. But intelligence never really equaled success in business or happiness. It's just kind of something you're born with.
Well, it is. And I'm very happy to have the level of intelligence I have because I've been around some very smart people and they will tell you they battle their brain because they can't turn it off. Right. And so that's the beautiful thing about having my level of dumbness. I mean, I used to go out when I was just having one of those days and I had like a wiffle ball and I would just throw the wiffle ball up against the wall. And Eric, I could do that for an hour and just disengage.
It's hard to disengage. I'll tell you that, especially because I got 4 kids. You get home and it's more challenging at home than it is at work.
What made you not go the electrical engineering route?
Well, yeah, I graduated in 2001, right into the dot com crash.
Yeah.
And, if you want to practice as an electrical engineer, you pretty much need a master's degree. And I really didn't want to go back and get that. And I couldn't get a job in the field at the time. I was living up in Seattle, and Boeing had just laid off 45,000 electrical engineers. And I was going to job interviews with 45-year-olds with 20 years of experience competing for the same job, and decided I needed a change of scenery. And so I moved down to the Bay Area and got a job in construction.
You kidding me?
No, I went and became a project manager. I went in for my job interview. I was wearing a suit, and my future boss says, "Hey, check out this guy. He's wearing a suit." He goes, "Says here on your resume, you're an electrical engineer. What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I need a job." He goes, "Great, you're hired."
Ain't it cool? And you sit back and look at it now. What a great thing that happened to you, because it gave you practical experience and something that really has served you well for the rest of your life so far. And I
Oh,
mean, if you had gone to work at Boeing, you would not have the depth of experience that got you where you are right now.
that's absolutely true. And I got the job as a construction manager. It's not like I was a construction management major, and I had to learn a lot. But then I made my big flip over to development after about 3 years. All of my friends, they said, "Oh yeah, development's a great industry. You should get into building houses. Lots of jobs out there, and you should get into land acquisition because that's the straight path to becoming the CEO." And this is like 2005, 2006, right when the housing bubble was peaking. So there were lots of jobs, and I went to go work for a really great company doing land acquisition. Again, it was those electrical engineering skills that paid off because I was a financial analyst. I just ground out pro forma models all day and all night. And, I knew how to do it. It was actually quite a bit easier than the stuff I was doing in college.
Wow. I'm telling you, that's what I've always, because I had a chance to hang with Eric for a little bit, and I just found you so fascinating because you've taken all of your experiences, no matter where they are, and you've used it as a stepping stone to do something else, right? Or to learn this little thing. I mean, listen, this guy writes songs in his spare time. It honestly does. You played in successful covered band, bar band, stuff like that. I mean, that's what I was saying about you. Smart people have a hard time turning it off. You just can't walk away and disengage.
And it might be a little bit, again, if you ask my wife, I think she'd say I'm kind of intense. I don't know if that's about being smart as it is being really driven.
Has that? Have you ever? I'm trying to find a way to phrase this. Has it ever brought you problems? Right? Because I think there's the drive to go about it. In golf and Scotty Scheffler, where he's talking about, you may have seen that, where he sits back and says, "Listen, that's a problem sometime for me, and I need to step back and let it not become overwhelming." And then Tom Brady slapped back and said, "Hey, watching me do what I do, that was the best lessons I could give my kids. That they had to realize how hard you had to work to do what you do." And I'm like, these are two guys who are at the top of their games with totally different perspectives. And you're unique because you're in the business world.
You're absolutely right. I haven't found a whole lot of detriment to working really hard. Um, I count working hard as setting aside time to be with my family. It's really just limiting the amount of time you spend doom scrolling or watching TV. I don't particularly like watching TV, but then at the same time, I really like reading books. So I read tons and tons of books, kind of as my outlet when I relax.
I never have time to watch like scripted dramas. And I only have 2 kids. You have 4. And I never, when somebody goes, "Have you ever watched Breaking Bad?" or, whatever, name the TV show. And I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. When do you have time for that?
Yeah,
And that, again, I got 2 kids. You got 4.
I'm so with you. The only thing I carve out time for is watching college football. Love college football.
Still big University of Washington fan?
Huge University of Washington fan. We got a decent team this year. I got the calendar mapped out. I go up to Seattle once a year to what they call the greatest setting in college football. I think of it as like my pilgrimage to Mecca. And so once a year I get up there.
Well, I'm a University of Alabama fan. And your boy's got some problems right now as we tape this. Kalen DeBoer.
Kalen DeBoer, he's a really good dude. I really like him. My brother is one of the boosters for the University of Washington football team. And so Kalen we used to hang out with my brother quite a bit. He's just a really solid guy. He came into UW at a great time when we had really amazing players, and, he put his polish on it. We'll see what he can do with Alabama. I mean, you got to give him, it's hard to step into Nick Saban's shoes,
Well, that's what I've always said, is that this guy's been a winner everywhere he goes. But the problem is, and this is my take on it as we go down, because you and I, what I tell you when I told you we're doing this podcast, I said, we're going to go down rabbit holes.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go down rabbit holes, and we're probably not going to stay on topic. And if you want to go hear Eric talk about nothing but business, he's been on those podcasts where he just talked, but he's so much more of an interesting guy. And that's why I wanted him on my podcast, because I'm like, dude, I was sitting there listening to you on one of the podcasts you were on, and it was like, well, downtown San Jose, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, do you even know who he is? You should be talking to this guy about all the stuff he's been doing. But what I was saying about college football, it's hard to get the kids motivated anymore. When the kids are making $1 million, can you imagine when you were 18 or 19, if you were making $400,000 while you were in college?
I run like $200 a week.
I tell you the stories.
Food on the weekends.
Oh, well, that's what I used to do when I went to college. I told the story before. You could buy the generic macaroni and cheese. You could buy a box of 4 boxes for $1. You could buy 5 cans of generic stewed tomatoes for $1. And I would boil the noodles, throw in the stewed tomatoes, and then take the cheese topping and top it like a spread. And that would be my meal for a week for $2.
Oh, I remember I found a place that would sell you a large pizza for $8. The pizza wasn't great. And so sometimes I'd buy 2 of them, and I didn't have a refrigerator. So I'd store them underneath my mattress in my room and I'd eat them all weekend.
Because that's what you did.
That's
what you did when you got through with that. I mean, and did you, because you were so driven, but yet you still did music. How did you, and I'm trying to teach this to my son. I have a teenager, right? And I'm trying to teach him, and I think this is what school is for. Time management, right? Because my thing is I'm an English lit major. Ask me how many things I remember from my classes.
Zero.
None. I don't remember anything. But I do remember Thursday nights was the big night out where everybody would go out on Thursday nights because kids would drive home on Friday, right? For home for the weekend. So Thursday night's the big night out. I had an 8 a.m. critical essay class that I could not miss. So everybody would be like, let's go out. And I'm like, oh, I'll go out with you, but I'm out at 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, I'm out because I got to be at that critical essay class. That's what I learned in college. How are you teaching those, or how do you plan? How did you manage that at UW?
I remember when I was a freshman in college, one of the older guys in the fraternity was talking with me. He said, it's a privilege to go here and you pay to go here. How can you afford to miss a single class? Because I don't care what you did the night before. You're going to be there. And I really took that to heart, and I tried to never miss a class unless I was like, really ill or something. But
yeah,
I showed up hungover quite a few times. In fact, one time I had to leave class to go throw up in the bathroom, but then I went back to class.
Well, that's the whole thing about learning to do the things when you don't want to. That's the sign of a professional. People ask me, do you ever feel bad when you're on the air? Do you ever wake up sick and don't want? Of course I do. I wake up in the morning and sometimes my wife's mad at me because I cheated on her in a dream. and you're just like, and so everybody has those bad days. But I think the compartmentalization That is required to be successful. And that's why I was kidding you when we first started on. How many things are going on in your head at one time? Because you truly, you've got so many things that goes that way. And that's what you learned. To me, if you're lucky, you learn that in college.
Right. The first time I kind of figured it out, and I try to tell this to my kids all the time, and I don't know if words convey it. I think you have to kind of experience it. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had a really challenging English teacher. He was kind of mean. I think the average grade in the class was a C. And I went home and I told my dad, I said, Dad, this teacher is terrible. He's mean. Everybody's doing really poorly. And my dad goes, I don't care what everybody else is doing. Because if you want to get an A, you can get an A. You're a smart guy. You just have to work harder. You have to think about what this teacher actually wants, and you have to grind it out and make it happen. And I did. I did extra work. I went above and beyond what I was supposed to do, and I got an A in the class. And that was kind of a big turning point for me in school. It was like, oh, you mean you can just get an A in every class if you want to, if you work hard enough and try hard enough? It isn't so much about being smart. Yeah, you can, if you think through exactly how to call it win at school, you put a lot of effort into it, and you don't really have to be that smart. You just have to prioritize time management and do the work and do it good, do it better than they expect. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, I can get perfect grades in every class I take if I just try hard enough.
Well, I love that phrase you just said, how to win at school, because it is a process. Right. And I told that to my son. My son's a sophomore. And I said, here's one of the, and he's a bright guy, student, everything. But like anybody else, he gets distracted. And I said, here's the other part you have. I said, I was bright enough to get by with the least amount of work. Right. I could do the least amount of work and make an A or a B, because the Lord blessed me with that much intelligence and I just had an understanding of it. But the rules changed when I got to college, right? As we talked about, you engineering and stuff like that. I was an all-state musician and thought I was something, but I didn't want to be a band director. So I got to college and I thought I would grace the college with my presence because I was so good. And then I saw the kids who were really good, that they were next level. And then it made me realize, hey, this isn't Juilliard or Berkeley. This is the little small school I went to. No. And then you said, well, and what do? They take that next level. They're trying to get to that next level and go from there. And trying to explain that to him is that if you can figure out how to manage your time, because you won't remember any of these classes. But I love that phrase. And he's an athlete. And I'm going to use that with him. Win at school. I love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it is. It's like a big game, and there are rules. And my favorite is if you say, hey, teacher, what's the most important thing that we talked about today? They say, oh, this is. And you go, oh, I wonder what the test question is going to be. Or if you show up at their office hours and say, what should I really be focusing on? And they go, this. Or if in class they say, this is a really key topic in this lesson, in your notes, put a giant star around that because that's the test question.
Well, here's the thing, because I went to school to be a teacher, and thank God that didn't work out. But because I'd have been horrible. But most teachers want you to pass. They want you to accumulate the information. Now, that guy you had, listen, I'm glad it worked out because it was an inspiration for you. But for me, I'm going, wow, that guy sucked at his job, right? Because he thought he was teaching English at Oxford. No, dude, I hate to break it to you, you're not. But most teachers do want you to figure out, and they're so used to, listen, I think most teachers would be shocked if you walked into their office and said, what do I really need to know about this course? What is it the most important thing that you want me to walk away with? I think most teachers would be like, are you kidding me right now? Let me tell you.
Yeah, I mean, teachers go, yeah, my office hours are this time to this time. And everybody goes, why would I ever go to office hours? It's like, you should go to every single office hours, because if you get to know your teacher, they just start telling you what's on the test. And suddenly you can just get an A because you know what you're supposed to be learning.
Yeah, and going that extra step. My thing is I took French because I had to, and I had to take a foreign language. And our final was we had to stand up and do a 5-minute speech in French. Actually, I think it was 10 minutes. We had to do 10-minute speech in French in front of the entire class.
Oh,
And I stood up. I had set out the week before, and I had taken a joke book and written out jokes in French. And I got up in front of the thing and started doing it. And my teacher was so thrilled that I was doing something other than mon mère is, mon père is, the same thing, that I was doing something different. Final exam, when I would get stumped, he would say, "Oh, zip up those events." And we get done. And you have to go into for your grades. And he goes, "I know you can't speak French a lick, but I'm so glad that you found a way to use the language. I'm going to give you a B and get the hell out of my class."
then another thing I was really into in school was art. I I had won a couple art contests as a kid. My favorite was draw a ghost you think will scare the Ghostbusters when the Ghostbusters cartoon show was on, after school cartoons when they used to have that kind of thing. And I won the art contest and they showed my picture on TV with my name, and all my friends called me to tell me about it. I got so excited. But art was a big deal to me when I was a freshman in high school. I took a watercolor class, and after they took the class, the teacher said, "I'd like to invite you to the seniors only art studio class next semester." And then I took that class every single quarter, every single semester for the rest of high school. And it kind of was dovetailed with music, right? I like music a lot too, kind of the same sort of thing.
You're a flipping Renaissance man. And I say that, I mean, because again, to get where you are and the level of success you've had, how everything paints into it, pun intended. But with the art, because I didn't know that about you. That's the thing. I was today years old when I found that out. But it starts to make sense. I mean, it balanced you out so much. I mean, you've dealt with a lot of engineering computer guys, right? And they get so focused on just the nerdiness of it. Same thing. You can do it with an athlete. They get so focused on the competitive. I'm going to be that much bigger, that much faster. And the politician. I'm going to this much power. It takes everything to balance everything out.
I agree. I mean, I kind of look back because I'm watching my kids go through it and thinking, well, how come they can't do what I did? Right? They're not kind of the same sort of person. It's like all the art I did in high school is still on my wall. When I was in college, I was in a fraternity. I was the rush chairman. I was so into it.
You and me too. I was rush chairman for my fraternity.
And then I was in a band, and I was an electrical engineer. It was like, what planet am I on?
When did you pick up the guitar?
I picked up a guitar when I was 14. My mom had tried to take Spanish guitar lessons a couple years earlier. So we had this old Spanish guitar just kind of lying around. I think this is key for when folks want to learn how to play guitar is if you just have one that's really easily accessible, you kind of pick it up and you just start kind of playing it. And it's the same even today. I always make sure I've got an amp and a guitar plugged in right next to my couch where I hang out in my living room because I want to just be able to grab it and play it at a moment's notice because then I'll play it alone.
See those guitars back here? I don't know how to play them, and I never pick them up and play them. I've always wanted to play the guitar, but I want it to be instantaneous. I want Elon Musk to be able to put that chip in my brain that I can automatically play the guitar.
My whole goal when I started playing guitar is I heard girls really like guys that play guitar. And I'll tell you what, it was absolutely true. In college, I could play all these Dave Matthews songs, and man, that was the secret right there. Oh, you want to come to my room? I could play some Dave Matthews. Oh, that'd be great.
See, and that's my thing is the guitar. Here's my musical fantasy was every nice hotel you go in usually has a baby grand piano, right? And I would love to be able to just walk up and casually sit down and whip out Rhapsody in Blue.
Oh,
And I'm just figuring every woman there would be thinking, whether they acted upon it or not, yeah, baby. Yeah.
My 11-year-old son can do that. He
You're
goes and
kidding me.
yeah, he's so good at the piano. He can sit down in hotel lobbies or the airport, and he can play and sing Billy Joel, the Eagles, Elton John. He's an
Wow.
interesting kid. He wrote a paper, if you could meet any two people, dead or alive, who would it be? And he wanted to meet Don Henley and Billy Joel.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He's
Uh, yeah. I think you would be disappointed. Don Henley's a jerk from way back
well,
and always has been.
for his 9th birthday, I took him to Madison Square Garden to see Billy Joel. And the average age of the crowd is probably like in their 60s. And
Easily.
here's this 9-year-old singing every single song, and the whole crowd was just staring at him like, who's the 9-year-old that knows all the words? And then he says, so Dad, after the show, we get to go meet Billy Joel, right? I said, no, that's not how concerts work.
Unless you know the people.
Unless you're Gary Scott Thomas.
Yeah, if you go to a country concert, well, maybe there's a good chance you're going to meet him. But Billy Joel, maybe not. I tell you what, when everybody was trying to do country music, I remember John Cougar Mellencamp came to the station. Right. And I went to school in the 80s. I mean, that was my wheelhouse. And I had and in the years I worked in pop, I never met John Cougar Mellencamp because he was a bit of a pill. Right. He's just that guy. And some people, you don't find it in the world of country music, but in pop music, you find people who are not the easiest to get along with. But he decided he was going to try to release a country album. And he came to the station and said the bare minimum. I was excited to meet him, but I knew that he's going to be a bit of a pill. But the funny thing of it is he that they were going to get something, and he was waiting out in the lobby. He walks outside and he opens up a pack of cigarettes and starts smoking. Now, here's what you need to know: he had open heart surgery 5 weeks earlier. 5 weeks earlier, that he still had the bandages on his chest, right? And I looked over at his record rep and I said, you think that's a good idea? He goes, you want to go out and tell him? No, I don't. I have no interest in that at all. But the rest of country singers, that's what I always tell everybody. They have figured out they don't live the life. I met Merle Haggard. I met Waylon Jennings and George Jones and those guys. Yeah, the kids of today know there's no there there. You don't want to go drinking and carousing and have 30 different women and all this other stuff and have pills to wake up and drinks to go to sleep. You don't want to do that. So now when they go on a tour, they bring their nutritionist, they bring their trainer, and they bring their family.
It's a different world out there.
Well, and that's the thing, because you've got the time. Again, watch me. I'm going down rabbit holes left and right. You say you picked up the thing and you decided to learn how to play guitar, and I started playing in bands. You couldn't take it at that either. You had to take it to that next level and start writing songs.
It's true. I started writing songs when I was in high school because I didn't just want to be in a band. I wanted to be the band leader, lead singer, guitarist. So for my first band doing grunge music, circa 1995, thought that was pretty fun. We didn't really play any shows. We just kind of played in my basement. One of my favorites, I had this huge Fender bass amp that I was playing my guitar through. And we like to play really loud because, you're in high school. Why not play really loud? And one day we're just rocking out to this song. And I just look over to my right and there's a cop standing in my basement looking at me. Hey, he goes, oh, you guys don't have to stop. You sound amazing. I went, okay, what's up, man? He's like, oh, your neighbor's called noise complaint, but it's not passing noise ordinance. You guys can play as loud as you want. I just wanted to come see what's going on.
Isn't that great when you meet somebody who's good at their job?
Yeah, I thought that was just great. I was like, look at that. What a nice guy.
And he made more of an impact on you kids at that time than anything else. That at that point you were afraid of police or stuff like that, or suspicious of them, but he changed the attitude of everybody in that room right there.
He sure did. I'm the Gen X generation, NWA, F the police and all that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, no, it made me like the police a lot more. And that's kind of continued throughout my career. I'm a huge fan of the San Jose Police Department and Los Gatos Police Department. Know a bunch of folks on the force. They do a great job.
That is one of the hardest jobs. And that's the thing with me. Are you going to have bad people in there? Yes. You know what? You're going to have bad people who are chefs. You're going to have bad people who are taxi drivers. You're going to have bad people who are electrical engineers. I can show you the bad people who are in radio. They're somebody should write a book. It'd be about 8 to 9 inches thick. Right? Don't forget when Taylor Swift sued the guy in Denver because he grabbed her butt during the photo. And at the time, she was like, what, 22, 23 years old? And he thought it'd be kind of fun to just, while they take the picture, cup her rear end. That's the kind of, that's what I'm saying. There's bad people everywhere.
There's bad people.
But the majority of people are amazing.
It's really hard to be a police officer. I did a thing through the San Jose Chamber of Commerce called Community Leadership San Jose. And a part of the training, it's a year-long class. Part of the training is you go to the police academy and you go through some of the, simulations that they have. One of their simulations I'll never forget, they have this kind of like a huge TV up against the wall. And it's one of those choose your own adventures. And you have a police officer that is choosing what happens, like what the people say to you while you're there. So you show up, you got your partner, you have a fake gun and a fake taser. And you're getting a call that says this. And I'll tell you, about 1 out of every 3 groups that went in got shot. Because you just can't tell. You stop some bikers on the side of the road and they look like they're going to be normal. And then suddenly they pull out a gun and shoot you. And it's like, yeah. Or some of the folks that took the class overreacted and they, shot at people when they shouldn't have. I mean, it's these split second choices that are so hard to determine to try to protect yourself while also protecting the people that, you're getting called on. I'll tell you my favorite. At the time I was in the class with, the executive director of Happy Hollow, the kids' playground area here in San Jose. And she had to call some disgruntled worker and he was freaking out in his cube and they're trying to calm him down. And the phone is ringing and he grabs the phone, he holds it up, he goes, "It's for you." And she just draws her gun and shoots him. And we all went, "Oh, cold-blooded." Because, we had about 30 people watching every simulation. It was crazy.
Well, you don't know, and like I said, I've known cops. I was, but she wasn't a cop when I was with her, but I dated one, and she's like, you know what we fear? Domestic violence calls. We call when husband and wives are fighting because they'll change sides. They'll be angry and stuff like that, and they'll change sides, and it's like it's a no-win. You go into it knowing it's a no-win, that you can't. So it's just. Yeah, the same thing. I've got nothing but respect. So because I know I only have to for a limited time because he's a busy guy. Let me go down that path again, just quickly, because I want to get to San Jose. How you go? Okay, I'm an electrical engineer. Okay, now I'm a project manager. Okay, now I'm going to property development and acquisition. How did you go there? And when did the light go on saying this what I do? This right here, what I do for now.
I want to tell you why I am all in on Bison Junk. First and foremost, they are a full-service, eco-friendly junk removal company, but with this difference. They focus on recycling and donating usable goods. Their customer service sets them apart, and they pride themselves on their integrity. They'll show up when they say they will, and they'll do what they promise. If you have hard-to-remove items like hot tubs or large furniture, they figure it out so you don't have to. They want to be who you always come back to when it's time to declutter and organize your home or business. They're worth every penny at bisonjunk.com.
Well, you start off as an analyst supporting senior land act folks. And, my friends were right when they said it is the fast track to CEO, because when you're building out these financial models, projecting into the future, you have to know everything about everything. How are you going to build it? How much does it cost? How long does it take? How are you going to sell it? How long does it take to sell the units? And then how does the money all work? How do you borrow? How do you finance it? And all of that is what the CEO needs to know when they're selecting projects to do as a developer. At the time, one of my friends said, all you got to do is do like 100-unit deal on your own and you're set for life. Because, 100 units, the developer is going to make quite a bit of money, maybe $10, $20 million here in the Bay Area for developing a project like that. Now, it's a lot of risk. And if you don't make that much money, it's not worth taking the risk. And you're putting up a lot of money in advance. So it's not like you're getting super rich, and it's kind of hard to do. But I thought, well, someday I can do 100 units. But I spent a lot of time as a developer kind of working my way up through the system, first in land acquisition, then in project management, moving from single family homes to townhomes, and then eventually to really high density stuff and kind of a variety of different product types, everything from, hotels, senior living, office, kind of figuring out how all of the different asset classes work. And, there's kind of like two aspects to it. There's what is really good for the community? Like, what does the community really want and need? And that's not necessarily listen to the neighbors who don't want anything. It's really, like, did San Jose, we just completed a Marriott Town Place Suites here in downtown San Jose. Did San Jose need an extended stay business hotel? They absolutely did. They don't have one. So creating that was a great thing. It also, 15% transit occupancy tax goes to the arts in San Jose. So that's a big deal for the local government too. Great project. We need housing everywhere. So you build housing to really help solve the housing crisis. But the other way you have to look at it is to get these things built, what you're really creating is you're creating financial investment vehicles in different projects or different funds that we're creating. And to try and make that work, especially in times like during COVID or since COVID with the high interest rates, has been a huge challenge here in the Bay Area. People talk a lot about California and how the government isn't doing so great. And it's kind of true. It's like we have the most expensive construction costs in the country. And you think, why? It's the same materials that they buy in Ohio. It shouldn't cost. It should cost more to put them in Ohio because a lot of the time they're coming from overseas, and you got to transport them out there. And it comes down to the California building codes. Everything that we build is LEED silver. Not because I'm environmentally friendly. I mean, I am, but not because I am, but because I have to be. And that's an extra 10% cost every project. And then to get through the red tape of environmental issues and local government and the neighbors influencing the politicians to stop development, that process, if you go real fast before you start construction, from when you start the process is about 3 years. And if you go real slow, it's 20 years. That hotel they just built in Santa Cruz, they've been trying to build that for 70 years.
And that's mind-boggling. When those of us on the outside looking in, and I've said that with the government as an aircraft carrier, but it's not even it's an aircraft carrier that's been supersized and added with 9 other aircraft carriers, and you're trying to turn that right. And the idea that it takes so long. And then if you don't do it right, and I'm not trying to get political, I'm just going for the thing. We've seen it down in the Palisades fires and, the Pacific, down in the Malibu and all that, where if you don't clear out the rubble of your house the right way, and only the government can tell you the right way, then they want to prove it. I mean, for you guys who are doing stuff like that, how do you, and I know you are apolitical, that you say I have to go on both sides. What's the hardest part of navigating that without just wanting to go, hey, I've done $3.5 billion worth of business. I'm good. I got these kids to raise.
You get into these processes and they're all different. And the state has kind of realized that the local governments and their responsibility for land use authority, that they've been abusing it for a long time and not building enough housing. So the state has just been passing law after law after law to try to override the local government's authority. And now it's like I have to be an expert legal analyst to know 20 different state laws in how I'm going to utilize which law and which section of which law in order to understand the risk associated going through the process. But I'll give you something that is really interesting, right? Let's say you got, a 10-acre site and you want to build, some townhouses. So you want to build about 200 townhouses.
Mm-hmm.
The value of the land, if you have to buy it before it's entitled, is about 30% of the value once it's entitled, once you have approvals from the government. So you're buying that 10 acres for 40 million now. And if you get the approval to build 200 units, it's worth 120 million. And you go, how is that possible? And it's because the process is so complicated and so hard, and there's so much risk that's the risk premium, the discount that you have to pay, or what you can pay in order to go through it.
That makes my brain hurt. How did I mean, you think about it. I mean, is it in San Jose? I had read or heard, aren't we supposed to have 60,000 housing units built by 2028 or 2030 or something like that? And we have 26,000, and under construction we have 1,600. I mean, and again, never be afraid to tell me I'm wrong. Okay.
No, you're pretty close, right? So San Jose has all these plans, and San Jose is probably better than almost every other local government in the Bay Area. And I can say that because I've done projects in 17 different jurisdictions. San Jose has a core belief that they want urban limit lines. They don't want high density development in their single family neighborhoods. They want to put high density development in their downtown core near mass transit and all their infrastructure. And that's a great plan, right? That's urban planning 101. So San Jose knows the plan, and they're doing everything they can to try and get housing put into place, but they can't even get over their own, they step on their own feet. I mean, they tried to, about 5 years ago, they tried to do this big fee reduction. Because by the way, at some point, the cities are like, these developers are making too much money. We should tax them more. And at this point, most cities charge about $100,000 per unit in taxes and fees. That's more than we pay for the land per unit. For high density apartments, we're paying
$100,000 a unit.
That's right. And San Jose says, well, we should incentivize development by reducing our fees. And I'll tell you that the neighbors came out in force. You're kowtowing to the developers, those evil fat cat billionaires. You're gonna give them a break. You're giving them a discount. I'm like, discount? 20 years ago, it was $10,000 a unit. In Texas right now, it's $15,000 a unit. It's not a discount. It's you guys are just charging the hell out of us.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't worry so much about fees, right? Because when I underwrite a project, when I go to buy a piece of land, I work it backwards to determine what the value of the land is. And as long as I know what the fees are, that's fine. The problem is that I can only, when I'm going to build something new, especially here in San Jose, I'm always going to be tearing down something else. There's no more land. Well, there's very little anyway. So, if that land has something on it that makes it more valuable than the raw dirt to tear everything down and build something new, I can't buy it. I always like to say, I've never successfully acquired a fast food restaurant. They make so much money that I can't buy their property for the value of land that I can pay. And,
fascinating.
You kind of think like some cities, Los Gatos comes to mind in particular. They just redid their general plan to show how they're going to build enough housing to meet the state's goals. And what they did is they took a bunch of their, 20 units to the acre apartment projects that they've got already built. And they said, now it's 50 units to the acre. And you kind of go, except no one will ever be able to buy those apartments because they're too valuable to tear down. And so when you increase the fees, it reduces what I can pay for land. When I can't pay that for land, stuff isn't getting bought and redeveloped. And that just means there's less development that's going to occur, and the housing crisis will continue to spiral the way the housing crisis spirals.
My thing has always been, nobody wants to think things all the way through, because that's what you need to do. And I've explained this to my kids. I'm like, when you're 1, 2, or 3 years old, my job is to get you to look from A to B. Right. And as you get older, A to D. right? At this stage of my life, I like to think I'm up to W, right? And by the end of the life, I want to be at Z. That's what you hope, that you can say, okay. And the people who are, well, this and we don't, you can't let that. Well, it ends up affecting you because you haven't looked at it all the way through. And so it's those things that just from the outside looking in, you go, I can't even imagine. And I always sit back and say, when people talk about it, people complain about parking. I'm like, well, how much parking? They charge $40 or they charge $60. I'm like, yeah. I said, it's a ripoff. How much would you charge if we gave the parking garage to you? Would you knock it down to $5? Would you? Or would you charge 65 or 70 or 80 or 110?
Supply and demand. The neighbors, they love complaining about height, density, traffic, and parking. Those are their big four anti-development things. And let's put it kind of in perspective, right? Silicon Valley, our economy is kind of the equivalent of Manhattan. And we're not that much bigger than Manhattan, but we're a suburban office park, and Manhattan's a bunch of skyscrapers. We are the only thing holding back our economy is the people that want to work here can't buy a house because there aren't enough houses, which makes our housing prices so high, highest in the country. San Jose, most expensive big city in America to buy a single family home, 1.6 million. And when you look at it like that, you think, for example, I live in Los Gatos. I moved to Los Gatos when I was in my 20s. And I scraped along and I eventually bought a house, and it was challenging. And, you think, well, what about my kids? Are my kids going to be able to live close to me? And the answer is no way. How could they ever afford to buy a house? I mean, Los Gatos, they couldn't afford a house in East San Jose. It's just, it's too expensive. And what you see is, these communities, what they really want is they want awesome restaurants and retail to, cool places to hang out, culture, museums and events and plays and all that kind of stuff that comes along with the metropolitan area. Living in Los Gatos, what you see is that the average age of the population has increased 5 years. Went from like 38 to 43 because the kids can't afford to live there anymore. And when that happens, older folks don't go out as much. And, Los Gatos was a happening, nightlife in the early 2000s. And now you go down there at night, it's pretty dead. And a lot of the stores have gone out of business because nobody's shopping at them. And, complain about traffic and parking all you want. You need people. If you want to have success in retail and restaurants and all that stuff, you need people to actually, go there. You need the population.
Well, we absolutely do. I mean, tell you what, in San Jose, try to find dinner after 9. You can't. Most restaurants, we went out to one of the nicer restaurant last Saturday night, and our reservation time was at 7:30. By the time 8:30 rolled around, there was 3 other people in the restaurant because we shut it down. We closed because it's the older crowd because everyone could afford to do that. And you're exactly right. I think because people don't think all the way through, as you said, you need places for those people. And oh, by the way, we need people. We need people. We need people having kids. We need people, it's just somebody who has 2 and you have 4. You have to think it all the way through. This is what the economy needs. This is what everybody needs. And they need a place to stay. What's the old joke about the difference between the environmentalist and the naturalist? The naturalists, they don't want anybody there because they want the land pristine. The environmentalist just doesn't want you there. So they don't have to look at you from their house.
That's right. I mean, you want to talk about some, mistakes that we're making out there. The first one was when we built Valley Fair Mall in San Jose.
Really?
Downtown San Jose was a real thriving retail area, kind of like what Walnut Creek is right now. Like you go down to Walnut Creek, it is cool.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Palo Alto, it's cool. Menlo Park. Downtown San Jose, they built Valley Fair Mall and a couple other malls, between 2 and 5 miles outside of their downtown, and they sucked the retail out of it because they didn't have the population increase that would be required in order to have enough people to go to the malls in downtown and the malls outside of downtown. So it's not like you see Lululemon in downtown San Jose these days because they're over at Valley Fair or they're in Santana Row. And that was a huge mistake where people didn't think it all the way through.
What would be if I could allow you to make your dreams come true for downtown San Jose, right? Not just the money you make. If you could say, if I could do this, this is what I would make downtown San Jose. What would be that scenario?
The first thing you need to do is you need to do what San Jose's plan is, which is to build about 25,000 houses in downtown San Jose. Downtown San Jose is a really, really small downtown. I mean, I think 90% of San Jose is single family homes. So we are urban sprawl. We're the definition of it. We were one of the first ones created it at the same time as LA. In fact, downtown San Jose by the mid 60s was a dead city. And the city eminent domained about half the properties and just tore down all the abandoned buildings and then gave it away to developers and subsidized development really to build downtown. And so downtown, come around the 90s, 2000s was kind of like an office park, right? There was no like soul to it. We've come a long way in downtown creating that soul. And now it's, after COVID especially, it's the nightlife that really makes downtown come alive. But what I would do, and I've thought about this, on the San Jose City Council, they're better than most, right? A lot of the small towns, especially, towns of less than 50,000 people, their local government is really not good. And their leaders are not good leaders. And a lot of times they're the only people that show up to the election. The number one reason in San Jose why people run for city council is because it's more money than they've ever made in their entire career per year. And, city council in San Jose pays $120,000 a year, which in Silicon Valley, if you're at $109,000, you're almost like getting down into poverty level as far as if that's your total income for your family. So, for example, I hired a woman out of USC a couple years ago. She majored in real estate development, and her starting salary was $105,000. And I kind of think, are you telling me that the leaders of San Jose with a $6 billion budget are about the same caliber of humans as fresh out of college graduates? Because that's really where they're at on their pay scales. And if it was, if I could change things, here's my plan. Someday, if I really make it big, I'm going to set aside a giant fund. And that fund is just going to be to pay the San Jose City Council. And we pay them, say, the equivalent of about $1 million a year per person. And then what you get? You get really good people going for that job. That'd be an amazing job to have. And finally, you'd have leaders of a city that actually knew what they were doing and would take the city in the right direction instead of going sideways and backwards and then forwards and then sideways,
Wow, you just blew my mind. Never thought about that. But you make an excellent point. You're making it from the business side, right? I always give people, how did you keep your job in radio for so long? And my standard response was, I'm the best they can afford. Right? They might have done better, but they couldn't afford them. And to be able to up that level would be something, because if you're at that level, you're already making a chunk of change at Google or Apple or whatever. You need to appeal to that level and have them also say, well, I can also do something civically. I can all do something that will matter, because in 25 years, nobody's going to remember that I did a widget at NVIDIA. Nobody's going to remember that.
And, when you talk to folks, I meet a lot of folks that would make great city leaders. And you say, hey, why don't you run for council? And they go, God, I would never do that. Are you kidding? Why would I waste all that time and energy? And then it's just politics. I'll just be stuck in the mud. I'm not going to do it. I'd never see my kids again. I'd have 5 meetings a night every night of the week. And all that's true, right? And you kind of go, so who are the people? They're trying to get a big paycheck, or else they're just kind of like, maybe they're egomaniacs and they just want to see their name in the paper. I'm not exactly sure, why we're not getting such a good caliber of people, but I think if you paid them well enough, you'd start getting that caliber.
It's got a cool downtown. I don't know if you've ever been there. You ever been to downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma?
No.
Their minor league baseball park is literally in the middle of the city. and it's surrounded by all these cool bars and restaurants. I mean, it is my brother-in-law lives here. And we went down there one night, and it's like, I always look forward to going to Tulsa. And it's about the same size as San Jose, right? It's got 1 million people or so. And it is so cool. And that ballpark is such a cool thing.
You know, there are so many cool cities in America. There's so many cool cities in the Bay Area. One of the joys of doing land acquisition for so many years is I've been to every single city and tried to understand it from a housing perspective, from a downtown perspective. Who are the people living here? And so I've got all my favorite cities out there as to which ones I would live in and which ones I wouldn't and why. But understanding cities has become a big part of my life. And I kind of find that to be fun. I don't think a lot of people, really understand the differences between all the cities. In fact, I don't even think a lot of them know where they even are.
100%. 100%. I mean, most of us live in our own little bubble. We live within usually everything in our life is within a 20-mile area, especially here in the Bay Area. I remember I knew some people who lived in San Francisco, and I'm like, how did you deal with it? Don't you just get lost in it? Don't you, the traffic? And they were like, no, we live in our little 5 blocks. That's where our grocery store is. That's where our restaurants are. There's the theater we go to. I mean, it's very small. And
San
I'm like,
Francisco
I
in
never thought
particular
about
is
that.
broken up into neighborhoods. It might as well be like 25 cities, right?
Yeah. It's stuff you don't think about it. See, well, what we're going to have to do, Eric, is we're going to have to do a yearly State of the State podcast, because I want to find out what those cities are you would live in. I want to find out the ones that, no, not so much, and what we could do better. Because I find this fascinating. I talk to a lot of national people and stuff like that. And, you and I have talked about that. But I really wanted to do one where I bore down on this where I live. This is where I live. And I love this area. Been here since 1991. And I am fascinated by it. It's why that's why I asked you. You got to go on this show with me. Because I've never had a chance to bear and really bore down on it.
I'll tell you something that you'll find interesting. So when I was early on in my land ac career, I had a really great boss. And he was talking about where private equity will finance your projects. Because you're going to go out and get senior debt from a bank, and you're going to go out and get private equity, or maybe no debt, maybe it's just equity. But he said, did they have rules? And I'm going to explain the rules to you from the terms of land acquisition. I said, great. He says, we're going to rank cities on 2 different scales. One is ABC, and one is tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 is how long does it take you to commute to a major job center. Tier 1, you're in a major job center. Tier 2, without traffic, half an hour to get there. Tier 3, over an hour without traffic to get there. So you could think, okay, Gilroy, that's kind of tier 2, maybe borderline tier 3. Hollister, tier 3. Tracy, tier 3. Hayward, tier 1, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the big changes in the last 15 years here in the Bay Area is the 680 corridor has switched from a tier 2 to a tier 3, as the city of Dublin has built so many offices and has so many people now that it's become its own major job center. Then on an ABC scale, it's really about income, right? It's how wealthy are the citizens of that city. So you can think Los Altos is an A. You could say maybe Campbell is a B. Gilroy is probably a B. Morgan Hill. Hollister is a C. Hayward's a C. And then different places in San Jose, because San Jose is so big, it's like, yeah, Willow Glen is an A. Maybe Eastside San Jose is a C. Evergreen, which is really East San Jose, is an A. So, Berryessa is maybe a B. Private equity will only finance projects. They'll go down to a B city, and they will go down to a tier 2 city. If you're a C, sometimes C cities in tier 1 might get some love. You see some development happening in San Lorenzo and Hayward and around there, right? But they really want to do stuff 1A. They want Palo Alto. They want Cupertino. They want Sunnyvale. All tier 1A cities. That's what they're into. And now everywhere I go, I start thinking in those terms of like, I'll be, like you said, maybe I'll be in, all over the country, and I'll be thinking, okay, so this is tier 1B. Okay, this is tier 1C. This is tier 2A. it's interesting thoughts.
Dude, that is fascinating. I am just, yeah, and that's the rest of us who don't get to know that job, right? To know that how you look at things like that, that is absolutely fascinating. When you start, again, thinking all the way through and seeing how the blocks fall together, that it's not just happenstance. Happenstance people went out of business a long time ago, right? That if you got that one major lucky hit, right? Everybody got that, they're always going to be an old town road, a little and then nothing else. You're going to have that big one hit wonder, Billy, don't be a hero. That's the difference. But you're not going to be playing Madison Square Garden 40 years later, and that's the person who builds the blocks and looks at it all the way through.
And by the way, didn't mean to knock Campbell. Campbell is now an A city. And this is another fascinating aspect of it is if you're surrounded by A cities, over the course of 10 to 20 years, you become an A city. Because the kids that grew up in those cities can't afford to live in their hometowns, but they still want to live close. And so they move to somewhere where it's slightly more affordable. Over the last 15 years, I've called it the rise of Campbell. As its downtown is now super cool because it's where the young people live and they go out to the restaurants and the bars. While downtown Los Gatos is dying, downtown Campbell has just caught on fire.
That is a very good point. And if you live in the Bay Area, that's true. Downtown Campbell's where you go. I mean, it is.
It is now.
Yeah, and you can just wait. Because that's what I used to love about Nashville, right? It's not that way anymore. But the old school, and I'm not saying that old school is better than the new school because it's not. It's different. But the old thing, I'd always celebrate is what we would do. We would go about 5:00 in the afternoon. We'd go find a bar. We'd order some appetizers and a drink. We'd listen to the band for 20 or 30 minutes. Then we would go upstairs if there was an upstairs, but there rarely was. Go next door and listen to that band, order some water, listen to that band for a half hour, go to the next place. And you could do that till 12 or 1:00 in the morning because you could always go to the next place. You didn't have to have a destination. Now Nashville's a destination. If you're going to go to one of the bars, you're going to go to that bar tonight because you're going to wait in line to get in, right? And that's what I love about Campbell is that you got that right. You can have a reservation, but if this place is busy, just go next door. They're cool too.
The last time I was in Nashville, I was there for a conference of private equity funds because Urban Catalyst, obviously, we have our own private equity arm. And one of the other groups that was there owns 7 of the bars on Broadway. And he goes, "Hey, I got 30 of these bracelets that get you into every single bar, skip the line." And man, I went to 10 different bars. It was so fun to see just what Nashville is all about instead of like just going to the one bar.
Yeah, well, that's when you have to know people and people.
Well, in that case.
We're going to do this. We're going to do this on a regular basis. Okay?
Sure.
We're going to catch up and do this. Dude, I have enjoyed this so much. Thank you for taking your time because you had to take some time. So thank you. And listen, if you want to know about our Urban Catalyst stuff, we're going to have links to website and stuff, but it's just a fascinating guy. So we've got all that there. My friend, thank you. I can't wait till we catch up.
Gary, great talking to you as always. Look forward to it, man.